had dark or curly black hair. He did not look like a ghost, just merely a youngish boy playing games with the staff. A gent working with the CNA, seeing the expression on his face, said, "Did you see it too?" When the first CNA said yes, they both got up and walked down the hall to check it out. There was no one there, and the door was still locked. In the same building, 2 stories up from F Ward, they alphabetize themselves. If you count the basement, it would be E, F, D is the basement, F, G, H. H is the top floor. Well, 2 stories up to good old H Ward. That's where I worked there for about 8.5 years there. And we had elderly male patients. And for Broughton, if you were in the G division, that was basically the end of the road at Broughton Hospital, because that's the general, and you've probably been there all your life. And it's sort of just where you go into. So from that point, patients were either discharged because they were too old to be mean or hurt someone, or they just simply died of old age. One staff member told me of a time when she caught a glimpse of a white or grayish image moving at the end of the hall, near the exit door to the elevator. This image came right through the door and across the hall and went to the room at the end of the hall, which was used as a dining area. So they came straight through the dining room, across, and went right on in like they were going for supper or something. Okay. But anyway, so the female staff member thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her. However, she was too scared to investigate. She just told me she didn't even try to look in there. All right. So, all right, another morning on H Ward, myself and staff members were getting elderly patients up for breakfast. And as we got them ready, we would just move them up the hall and either take them into the dining room or we would park them if they were in wheelchairs, like in the hall right there beside the door. And one patient had wheeled himself right up to the door and was sitting out there, kind of in the doorway. Well, about that point, this technician who was down the hall heard footsteps coming. And she looked back to see what it was, and there was no one there, but she kept hearing the footsteps. She heard the footsteps walk up the hall, right through the patient sitting in the doorway and into the dining room. And she said that she couldn't leave because she was assigned to those patients, but there was no way that she could get a hold of anyone to let them know what was going on. So she just had to stay with the ones that were in the dining room. And the extra one that walked on up there, really. So from that point, she just sat in there with us until we got up there and told us what happened. So, I'm going to skip that a little. We used to work in a building called the Bates Building. That's a scary name in and of itself, right? Bates. Well, that's the building's named after. But this happened on Ward 31, which is in the Bates Building. Now, Ward 30 is the downstairs, and we had patients down there, but we had nothing upstairs. It was just empty. Okay. So my nursing supervisor told me this story, and I believe it to be true because I believe everything she told me. All right. She said that one time that she and other people were working down on Ward 30, and they heard an awful commotion upstairs. And it sounded like a scraping noise across the floor as if furniture was being moved around, heavy furniture. But the upper level was unoccupied. So she got some CNAs to go with her upstairs to check it out. And when they got up there, nothing appeared to be moved. I mean, everything was in its spot. There was a row of empty lockers. They had wooden lockers for the patients, and they could move them anywhere. And there was a row of empty lockers against the wall there. And when they opened up the door of one of the closets, the clothes hangers were still swinging. And she said, at that point, they fled, and they notified the Broughton police to come and investigate. And after checking for trespassers, the police reported they could find nothing that caused the noise or the movement of the hangers. All the doors leading into the ward and out the ward were locked. Excuse me, and they require a pass key to get in. You have to have a key. So speaking of the Bates Building, I'm sorry, there have been numerous mysterious happenings there. In 1994, this building housed the offices of the GEGO agent supervisors, and it served as a conference room as well. When I first started work there in 1994, that's where my supervisor saw this piece of excuse me. It's a long building that's been extended north and south, and it's got different levels that have been built on as the years went by. And there is a map in the book. If you should get the book, you'll see it. It sits directly across from the Thomas Building south, and that's where I first saw him. I first got originated. So this building is directly across the street from that. And it means that when I left 27, or my ward, when I saw the first ghost, I'd have to walk through a dark parking lot to get to this other building. And it was usually empty. There was no one in this whole building. And I never was really afraid. I've never been afraid to take that trip to sign out. And I never had any problems until one night. And there's my true story, y'all. Okay. After I worked at Broughton Hospital for a couple of years, there was a nurse supervisor who worked for a shift. And she had been brutally murdered by her husband. And she was from Maryland, by the way. She lived it that way. She was such a sweet lady, and I'd always told her that she was the angel of the unit. Because if you had to call in for any reason, she never gave you a hard time. You know, and it would make you feel less guilty for having to miss work. And from what I understand, she had been in G Division for a long time. And the night that this happened, maybe she came along to check on a few things. So I was sitting in a conference room filling in my time sheet for the upcoming week in order to get paid for my vacation. Anybody who's worked for the state knows you have to fill out your time sheet by hand. And so there I was, writing down my vacation time, and out of nowhere, and to my right, a female's voice said, well, Margaret had a heart attack. It felt like my blood pressure shot straight up, like somebody had grabbed a steel rod up the back of my neck. There was nothing there. And so I'm just sitting here, and I thought, well, what do I do? So I eased up out of the chair, and I practically ran outside. There was no one in that building, let alone in that room. And so that was the last time that I went over there by myself. But I would always think that it was her, the nurse, that was so sweet. They call my name. Now, in my next book that I've written, that I expounded on that story a little bit, I have more details and a little bit more history on that, so that we will get more information in the next book. So when I had mentioned this event to my nursing supervisor, she told me that many a night she was sitting in her own office in that same building, filling out paperwork. And in the reflection of the wooden door, you know, it was like a jar, and the shine went down the hall, that she could see people passing by, but that no one ever actually physically went by that she could see. But she saw the reflection of people passing by her door. So she said that as soon as she could, she would get her work done, and she would get out of there. And she would spend the rest of her time on the wards with other staff, and only go back to that building when it was absolutely necessary. And I always wondered why she hung around on the board for so long. You know, you always want your supervisor to go on, you know. And she hanging out with us. Now I know why. She was scared too. All right, let's see here. All right. Recently, I talked with a CNA who related an event that happened to her when working in the Bates building on Ward 29 one night several years ago. She said that she caught a glimpse of movement in one of the back bedrooms and went in to check out the situation. She worked with the elderly, and as soon as someone had gotten up and was able to get back in bed by themselves. She said that when she got in the room, there was a woman wearing an old-timey-looking hospital gown. It was very long, and where the woman's feet should have been, there was nothing. She was floating in the air. Now, and I would like to reiterate that these are stories that people told me is true. So, I mean, I believed her, and I still do. And she said that the lady waved at her, and that was the final straw. She just left that bedroom. She didn't stay, see who she was, or check her ID. Okay. Now we're going to move to another building. It's called the Scroggs Building. And this is also adjacent to the first ward I worked to, which is the Thomas Building. Okay. The Scroggs Building houses wards 13, which is the basement, 14, and 15. It was originally built to be female wards back in 1887. It was named for Felix Mortimer Scroggs, who was the first steward at Broughton Hospital. Now the steward, if y'all don't know, is a person who collects money and makes orders and goes around and makes sure that people do what they're supposed to do, and not they have a curfew at Broughton Hospital, so people could not be out on the grounds after 9 o'clock at night for any reason. You know, so he was the one to make sure people followed the rules. When I first worked there, it was used for geriatric patients, and they utilized a special program called the Eden Alternative, because they had 2 dogs and 2 cats living there, and a pair of finches in every patient's bedroom. And it was a wonderful idea, and the patients loved the animals.